Today we have the poem Small Towns and the River by Mamang Dai. Mamang Dai is an Indian poet from the state of Arunachal Pradesh. She was born in Itanagar and educated in Shillong. She was born in 1957. She belonged to the Adi tribe. The word Adi means mountains in Arunachal Pradesh. And in these vast mountains, the people we know are so associated with nature. And so, like the romantics, you have learned of so many of the romantic poets. She too is a poet who, for whom nature was a very spiritual, very conscious being. So let us see. Small towns always remind me of death. My hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. It's always the same. In summer or winter, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. So here the poet is taking us into her land. She is also called a Northeast poet, a poet from the land of Arunachal Pradesh. But the very word to be clubbed as Northeast is also rather condescending, I feel. I believe that we should refer to these poets or every poet of India as an Indian poet first. She is first and foremost an Indian poet. We cannot, this is not to make a poet only from a particular place, is to give it a homogeneous quality. So she is primarily, this is something that as a student, we have to handle this in a very diplomatic manner. She is a person who writes about her land, that is Arunachal Pradesh, and at the same time, she is thoroughly an Indian poet. Here, we need to know that we need to give the importance to the uniqueness of that land, just as we would not call Madhavi Kuti a Keralite poet, but we know that the essence of Kerala is there in her poetry. She is an Indian poet. The same goes for Mamang Dai. Just like you would read of Salman Rushdie or Madhavi Kuti in the same vein, this is a great poet of India. She was the first person from her place to win the IAS. She was selected for the IAS in 1979, but she did not pursue it, but rather went on to become a journalist. For her novel The Black Hill, she won the Sahitya Academy Award. So here she says that small towns always remind me of death. So the very poem starts in a very lucid, very simple language, but it talks about something very morbid right at the beginning. This is about death. Small towns remind me of death. She says that my hometown lies very calmly amidst the trees. Her hometown is full of greenery. It is a beautiful green land, the land of Arunachal Pradesh. It is filled with beautiful rivers and mountains and trees. Nature speaks in every nook and corner. Why is the poet reminded of death in these small towns? I believe personally that I came from a small town. So I recall that when you grow up in a small town, you know everybody. And those of us who have been in villages of our paternal, ancestral villages, those of us who have been brought up there, we know that we know the whole community. We know everyone. And each death feels so personal. It feels as if it's not like how you were living in a metro city where you would read of deaths in the newspaper, or you are living in a very bustling part of the town and you would read in the paper about some death that has happened, and that is just a phase in the newspaper. So you would read it maybe in a column in the newspaper and you would just leave it. It's an obituary. Maybe you would feel a momentary sense of mortality, but then you would pass on, pass by. But here in a small town, each person is known to another. Each person becomes a part of another person's life. And I recall, so do you. And if you are little students, then your parents do recall that they would have gone to so many of these funerals. And you would have participated, they would have participated in all the traditions that the funeral will call you to do. Maybe the sort of rituals, the rites, the rite of passage, the prayers. And so you are constantly witnessing mortality. She says it is always the same. I think the word same is a key word here. In these small towns, there is a sense of predictability, a sense of monotony. Everybody gets back inside their houses by the time it is 7 or 7:30. Uh, People no longer stay out on the roads. The women folk are definitely inside. The men too return with the, from the farms. The day's labor is done and the lights are switched off quite quickly. And these people who are in one with the nature, they would wake up very early to set out to the mountains, to set out to their farms. So there is a sort of monotony, a predictability for maybe for a town person or a person from hailing from the city where work goes on into the night, where there are 24/7 shops and malls. For such a person, this would seem like boredom, but at the same time, for those people living there, as I have personally witnessed, there is swift change and the moments are raising each in domestic felicity and social unity. So here she says there is always the dust flying or the wind howling. The wind is howling in the gorge. The gorge is a narrow valley between steep mountains. So you can see this is a free verse, and definitely there is symbolic. We have already come on both sides. One side is calmness, predictability, serenity. On the other side, there is morbidity, death. The whole change of the cycle of life. And there is a sense of grief here, grief at the passing by of life, not just individually but collectively. The passing by of culture, of tradition. Here we have to look into this poem as a post-modern and a post-colonial poem. Colonization would have robbed these places of a lot of their authenticity, just like the whole of India was affected by colonization. And postmodernism, people of the place were rather more pantheistic in their culture, and they were nature worshippers. And now that very nature would be corrupted in various parts, and modernization would have happened. People would have also converted. There was the missionaries who converted several tribes into Christianity. So all these changes we need to feel in these powerful lines. Just the other day, someone died. In the dreadful silence, we wept, looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses. Life and death, life and death. Only the rituals are permanent. So here again, the poet says, just the other day, someone died, and we all wept. In the background of this poem, there is also the story goes that Mamang Dai had lost her aunt during this period when she wrote the poem. So there is a very personal element here where she would definitely have grieved for her aunt. At the same time, she says that all those people who were for her like family. So here we see also the change in, as we have witnessed, in the joint family becoming the nuclear family. And in the joint family, how the children treated the older people as they were very respected members of the family who taught their culture and their traditions to the younger ones. So in that dreadful silence, the whole place is filled with that silence of death. We wept looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses. Wreath is the flowers that are kept, bouquets of flowers kept for the dead. And tuberoses. Why are the tuberoses sad? You and I can be sad. Can the tuberoses be sad? So this is called transferred epithet or pathetic fallacy, where these inanimate object is sort of embodying or taking on the feelings of the person who is relating it. So here you can get the poetic device transferred epithet. Life and death, life and death. Again, there is repetition. She says only the rituals are permanent. So here we see that this question as to why do we, as human beings, all over the world, why do we observe these rituals? When there is a death, why do we observe certain rituals, certain particular prayers, or the child lighting the pyre of the father or mother, or the son holding the being the coffin bearer, or the descendant who is throwing the dust onto the coffin. So these are all rites and rituals, or maybe preparing a funeral feast for the villagers, a sort of parting, an opportunity for everyone to come and say goodbye to the departed. Why do we do all this? Here, Mamang Dai says that only rituals are permanent. Life is not permanent. Life is mortal. It is something that is so fleeting, so temporary. And death will occur to every being on earth. All that has life must die. But rituals, they are permanent. They are the way in which each generation is taught to handle death, is taught how to manage this grief, how to contain it, how to say bye, goodbye to the departing ones. The river has a soul. In the summer, it cuts through the land like a torrent of grief. Sometimes I think it holds its breath, seeking a land of fish and stars. Throughout the words, we see the device enjambment because each line is telling us, is becoming a preface to the next line. So there is enjambment. We are waiting to know the story. Then the river is definitely a metaphor for the journey of life and death. The river is used as a, it's used in all forms of art and literature, in pictures, in great poems. A river by Ramanujan, or Madhavikutti's river that flows into the ocean, where she says, I am the ocean. I am the culmination of life, love and life. So the river is symbolic of life. So many cultures are there where the river is honored during a funeral or during a marriage. So in the land of Coorg, there is the culture where it is seen that it is the river being wed to the sea. And that is seen as symbolic of marriage, of continuity, of life. So here he says that, but the word cuts, the river cuts through the land. This is a word I feel that we need to give attention to. Why cuts? Cut is like a wound. So there is pain too. In that meandering river going through the land, there is pain. The river witnesses life that is passing by. So here we feel that the river cutting through is sort of reminding us of the wound of birth itself. Man's life begins in pain, in the cut away from the mother's womb, pushed into this world, and the very amniotic fluid in which the child swims is sort of like the starting of that river of life. The river gives birth. It is the source for agriculture. The river is the water for the fields. And we see that there are rivers all over in every state of India. Rivers are also standing for holy. Rivers are considered as something pious, something spiritual. Here, I believe we need to focus on the cyclic nature. Here, even though we see that there is an element of morbidity with death, there is also the element of the cycle of life. Here she talks about the river coming in, and we see that we need to think about the water cycle There is oxygen cycle, there is a nitrogen cycle, there is all these cycles that make life continue. So the river has a soul. It knows, stretching past the town, from the first drop of rain to dry earth and mist on the mountain tops. The river knows the immortality of water. Here the poet presents to us the permanence of nature. These lines, we definitely need to mention the device of imagery, the natural imagery, the visual, powerful imagery of mountains and meandering rivers, as well as the auditory imagery of the gurgling river. Both are given here. They see the poet says the river has a soul. So again and again we see the poet telling us that nature is not inanimate. Nature has a consciousness. Nature, we see that she is quite Wordsworthian in her approach to nature. Nature is living, breathing consciousness, part and parcel of man's life. The river has a soul. It goes stretching past the town from the first drop of rain. So here we see the water cycle, the condensation, the evaporation, the going back, and the clouds bringing on rain, the rain joining into the river joining into the sea. The river has to culminate into the sea. She says that sometimes I think the river just holds its breath, dreaming, seeking a land of fish and stars, which is that land of fish and stars, where stars are above shining, where the moon is calling and the fish are swimming. That is definitely the sea. Just as the river dreams of going into the sea, we humans dream of going into a nirvana or into a spiritual, into a mukti, or, we leave this world of Maya, a world of, this, we wish to reach a transcendent level, leaving what is material for what is permanent. It could be that spiritual cycle that the poet is talking about, the immortality of water, the immortality of nature that keeps bringing everything back, replenishing it with the rains, new life coming. And so too, I believe the poet wishes man to believe that he too is a part of the karmic cycle. We know that so many people all over the world believe in the karmic cycle of life. So, a shrine of happy pictures marks the days of childhood. Small towns grow with anxiety for the future. The dead are placed pointing west. When the soul rises, it will walk into the golden east, into the house of the sun. So various religions have their own way of treating the karmic cycle of the belief in maybe eternal life or rebirth or the spiritual gains at the end of life. So there are differences in various cultures. Here the poet gives a lot of importance to her traditions and her culture. We need to remember another thing here is the people of Shillong or Arunachal Pradesh, they have a great oral literature. They have celebrated an oral literature, which is what the poet is now bringing into. She is bringing it forth as written literature for the world to see. So, generation after generation is educated by these stories that their forefathers would tell them. Amidst those bonfires, they would sit around, they would tell stories and poetry, which was all part of that oral literary culture. And I feel that the very poem is written as a free verse. It is lacking in structure and it does not have a proper meter. It rather feels like a river on those highlands, which is going in a rather zigzag pattern, not like the rivers in our lower lands. But in the sense that this is like oral literature, that as you speak, the oral literature is the spoken language, the beauty of the spoken language, where you are just telling the next generation not only about history, you're not only educating about the past that has happened, but rather about life, about the magic, the spirituality that is life. So she says the dead, they place their dead pointing to the west. They are buried in such a manner. And here the west stands for death, for temporary, whereas the east, the golden sun, stands for immortality, eternal bliss, eternal life. And the poet says that the dead rise from this life, the karmic cycle takes them to the golden east, where man is, we are all longing for that beautiful golden light that seems to await us in knowledge, in that nirvana. So here there is a shrine of childhood memory. She says that everyone's childhood passes in bliss. Maybe the poet herself running among these mountains, not thinking about what this postmodern culture is going to do. Is it going to erase her culture? Is it going to wreck the nature? No, we do not think of all this as we are children running in that nature, being like Wordsworth, one with nature. And we see in that Wordsworthian poems how he invokes nature, how he says, I wish I were a child again, playing in those gurgling streams, where he says that I, as a man who worships nature, is standing second to the child who unthinkingly, unknowingly plays in a stream. So, childhood is a place of bliss where man is truly innocent. And it is that innocence that he seeks through the rest of his life. So, in the cool bamboo restored in sunlight, life matters like this. In small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods. So, here she says, in the cool bamboo restored in sunlight. So, we see that visual imagery of the sun spreading beautiful golden rays on those mountains. Life continues, nature continues, and man, from dust is he born, and to dust is he returning. And being part of the spiritual cycle, being part of the collective whole, she feels that that is the only way in which human beings can get peace. We too have to believe that, like each drop of water in this river, each drop has a different path, each drop has a different destiny. But as a collective whole, they are all part of that river going into the sea. So it is with us human lives. We too are part of that collective conscience, collective consciousness, and we too are part of this natural world. And we need to be one with nature. So this we all want to walk with gods. It could mean that in this life we wish to imbibe that spirituality. And in small towns, she says that each person being connected to the other as well as to the nature, there is they are literally walking with the gods, plus they are also hoping for an eternal bliss which enables them to walk with the gods or with the rituals, with the culture and the beliefs that they grew up in. So here we see that this is definitely in a conversational style, and yes, post-colonial, post-modern. We also need to remember that the poet speaks from, there is a woundedness in the poet, for she speaks from her land of Arunachal Pradesh, which is surrounded by the China, Myanmar, Bhutan. The very strategic location of this state makes its people, you would say that however diplomatic we may be, we have to say that they do not get the attention that they deserve from the center. The central government does not give them enough importance for their culture, their traditions, their literature, their art, their language. And Mamang Dai is a forceful, strong personality, strong poet, hailing from there, claiming her oral literature, claiming that India notice and give importance to Arunachal Pradesh. And we know that they are always, it is definitely no fun to be a border state. They would have a political insurgency, immigrant problems, all sort of things coming in to their culture. So she wishes for that individuality. Throughout the poem, we see a search and a forceful hope to push forth the individuality of that state, as well as to be recognized as the strong member state of India. And I think this is a poem that we could also take it in a sense that this is about every small town or every little village all over the world. Thank you.